Okay, we are live. How's it going, everybody? Chuck Holton here, coming to you from Panama, my studio here. And today we're going to be talking about the IDF and what's about to happen, or maybe not happen, in Gaza. I appreciate your waiting patiently while I get everything together. One of the problems with me running these things by myself, I mean, I've got a lot of help here, obviously, from our moderators, Mama Marissa and Rubina, Mrs. Tomlet, and my wife, and Nathan is on here sometimes, keeping the shenanigans from getting too out of hand in the chat. I really appreciate you guys for all that. But I'm the only one that's here dealing with lights, camera, action, microphones, etc., and research, trying to have something to talk about. And I'm also trying to keep my day job, which is editing and putting together packages for CBN Newsmax and other networks around the globe. So thank you for your patience while I get my act together. I hope you can all hear me and understand. Whoa, hello, hi, GJ. Thank you for the tip there. Appreciate it. I'll hit like on that. So, like I say, we're going to be talking about what's about to happen in Gaza. Today is Wednesday, or it's almost Thursday in Israel now. So in 48 hours, we will know whether or not Israel will be back fighting in Gaza, or whether or not there will be more hostages released. Now, the Trump administration has been, I want to just start by framing it this way. President Trump has been making huge gains around the world in getting American hostages returned, prisoners returned from lots of different places. And Lynn, I see your question there, and maybe somebody can, well, I don't know if anybody can tag that since Connie's not on. I'll pin that up there, so I'll get to that in a minute. President Trump has been just having his representatives gallivanting all around the world, getting American prisoners and hostages released. Most recently, they got a guy, he sent one of his envoys to Moscow and came home with an American citizen. It's a guy that I think is a school teacher, was in jail in Russia for possession of marijuana for 5 years. Not exactly sure of all the details of that story, but it wouldn't surprise me a bit if the guy was just there vacationing and the, Russian police sort of found marijuana in his bag, because I wouldn't put anything like that past the Russian government. They want prisoners to hold as bargaining chips. In return, the Russians got back a cyber criminal, some kind of hacker or cryptocurrency guy. Listening to the press briefing that was just going on in the White House briefing room a minute ago, it sounds like he had to give up $100 million of his ill-gotten gains as a part of the deal. So that's good. And I'm sure that this guy who was just released from Russia, they say he kissed the ground when he got back to America. I would too. I'd be kissing everybody. But Lynn, I see your question there, so I will get to it in a minute. Also, breaking news right before we went live. I was just reading this breaking news summary that came out. They have released another American citizen and two other guys who were not Americans from jail in Belarus. Belarus and Russia, Belarus, they're pretty close. But so now to add to the 6 that they released from Venezuela and the Americans who've been released out of Gaza, since this ceasefire took effect. The Trump administration is batting 1,000 and getting people out. However, what is going to happen in Gaza? Because here's what happened. Hamas, true to form, started balking at the terms of the ceasefire deal, claiming that Israel was not holding up its end of the bargain, even though by all accounts it certainly was. There's no question that Israel was doing exactly what it said it would do according to the ceasefire deal. Hamas was still upset that there wasn't more aid getting delivered, even though they were delivering exactly what they said they would. I just put up a video over at chuckholton.com of Gazans stealing the aid off the trucks as it's moving. The trucks, a big convoy of semis full of aid, driving through Rafah, I guess. And Gazans just descending on the trucks like a horde of locusts and pulling the aid off the trucks as they're moving. They never slow down. It's amazing. And I just put the video, I can't show it to you here. YouTube will have an infarction. So I put it up over at chuckholton.com. You can go over there and watch that. Suffice it to say, though, the Hamas guys are saying that Israel's not living up to their end of the deal. Meanwhile, Hamas is the one that's not living up to their end of the deal. They've been threatening IDF troops in Gaza, to which IDF has the right to, shoot at them, and they have. They've been doing their best to move weapons and stuff into northern Gaza. The IDF has pulled out of the Netzarim corridor. Hi, MM. Good to see you. They have allowed the aid that they said they would allow into Gaza. They've allowed Gazans to move north back into northern Gaza without checks. They've lived up to all of the things they said they would. And Hamas, as you know, decided, nah, not good enough. We're not going to give back the next block of hostages. This is after Hamas has decided that, this wasn't spelled out apparently in the ceasefire deal, although it certainly is part of the Geneva Conventions, that you're not supposed to use prisoners of war and put them on public display in humiliating acts. That is part of the laws of war. Of course, Hamas is not a signatory to the Geneva Convention, so you can't expect them to abide by that. But it's certainly egregious what they're doing. And sounds like President Trump just had enough of it. And he said in a press conference from the Oval Office the other day, he said, you know what? This releasing people in drips and drabs, 2 or 3 at a time, it's absolute torture. I said on the live day before yesterday or something that it is absolute torture for the Israeli people. You could not design a mechanism that would be better suited to psychologically terrorize Israelis than what you're seeing unfold in this hostage release deal. Having to give up hundreds of convicted terrorists who have been instrumental in murdering Israelis. Meanwhile, they're giving up 1s and 2s at a time each week, never knowing whether they're going to be alive or dead by the time they get released, making them traipse through this gauntlet of screaming barbarians and stand up there and get humiliated wearing a jersey that has their, I don't know if you've looked closely at the photographs of the prisoners they've released, but they make them wear these sweatsuits that have a patch sewn right here in the chest that has a picture of them, and it says property of the Al-Qassam brigades or whatever brigade they're being held by. You couldn't design something to be more cruel to the Israelis than that. And that's exactly what Hamas intends. And then when they get their people back, the prisoners get feted as heroes, lifted up on people's shoulders, paraded through the streets, waving weapons and saying they can't wait to go back to war with Israel. Well, they're about to get what they're asking for. Israel has canceled all leaves for reservists, has called up a whole bunch of military units, and is right now amassing forces along the border with Gaza. Now, they say that about 40,000 troops from the IDF have taken part in this war so far. 40,000 people. That's like 4 brigades. And let's see, in my notes here, I believe at the peak of the conflict, they had about 20,000 in Gaza at any given time. As of February 12th, today, they've withdrawn their forces from key areas in Gaza, including the Netzarim corridor, but the troops remain stationed around Gaza's borders in what they call the buffer zone. Now, I have a photo of this. I think I can show you right here. You see here the area around the edge. Well, it doesn't show the buffer zone, but it's about a half mile all the way around the edge of Gaza. So the entire border region, they've carved out about a half mile that they have bulldozed. It's flat and there's nothing in that half mile corridor. And the Israelis have their troops arrayed around that. But what they're saying, because Hamas is threatening to cancel the hostage release, I can tell you right now, you want to know a little secret? Hamas is bluffing. Hamas is not going to cancel the hostage release. However, by threatening to do so, they goaded President Trump into saying, you know what? I'm tired of watching them send out 2 or 3 at a time. If they don't send all of the hostages back by this Saturday at noon, then all bets are off. I'm going to let all hell break out. Now, in reality, it's not up to Donald Trump. It's up to the IDF. It's up to the Israeli government whether or not all hell breaks out in Gaza as of noon on the on Saturday. And the IDF has chosen to take what President Trump said and run with it. Benjamin Netanyahu has said kind of, you know what? He's right. This is torture and this is not fair. And so we want all of our people back. Well, what that is going to do is basically make, here's what's going to happen. I'll just tell you, this is my prediction. What's going to happen? Hamas is going to go ahead and release the 3 hostages on Saturday that they had previously agreed to release. And the Israelis and President Trump are going to say, ha, see, let that be a lesson to you. Don't mess with us, or we'll send you a strongly worded threat. What needs to happen, especially now that President Trump has come out and said that, which is was definitely the right thing to say. He should have said that day one. Actually, Benjamin Netanyahu should have said that on October 8th. And they shouldn't have sent 20,000 troops at a time into Gaza. They should have sent 200,000 troops into Gaza. I mean, they should have hit Gaza. You remember shock and awe from the last time the United States actually won anything in a war? Shock and awe works great The whole idea of proportionality is a farce that was concocted by diplomats and bureaucrats who have no idea how to win a war. The concept of proportionality is a surefire way to ensure that a war continues as long as possible and creates a maximum amount of suffering on both sides until one of the sides just gets so tired of it they just stop. That's what proportionality does. Oh, you kill 15 of our people, we kill 15 of your people. You drop a bomb on us, we drop a bomb on you. That's proportionality. If you want to win a war, you've got to be willing to say, we will hurt you so bad if you don't release our hostages immediately that your children's children's children we have into Gaza. And there will be not one stone left upon another. We will sow the ground with salt. We will cut off everything. There will be nothing entering there. That's the kind of language that's going to get things done. Donald Trump is getting there. He's not quite there. But the reason he's not quite there is because he's not actually willing to unleash all hell on Gaza. As I've said many times, it's not really possible. I mean, of course, he could. I mean, he could send troops over there if he wanted to, but it's not in his nature. It's not like Trump is afraid to strike from time to time when it's useful and politically profitable to do so. And we don't really want a president who's just going to fly off the handle and send troops every time somebody sneezes in our general direction. So this is not really a criticism. This is the reality of the political environment that President Trump exists in. And he's pushing it further than any other president has in my lifetime, I think, except maybe Ronald Reagan. And so by saying, if we don't get all of our hostages back, what he did is he ensured that we would get the 3 that they said they would give back. What I would desperately love to see would be for Hamas to return the 3 that they had previously agreed on Saturday, and Benjamin Netanyahu go, nope, not good enough. We said all. All means all. So it's on, and just hit the button, hit the smite button, make it happen. Send everything that they can into Gaza. Send more troops than the Gazans knew that the Israelis even had. Just open the floodgates. You want to see an Al-Aqsa flood? Well, it'll flood from Al-Aqsa into Gaza. We'll, if I was Benjamin Netanyahu, I'd be like, we'll show you what Al-Aqsa flood looks like. You're going to see. And so and he should be pounding that drum over and over and over again, making it very clear. All means all. And they should set up a giant countdown clock overlooking, maybe over at the Wailing Wall, overlooking the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and put a camera on it and live stream that thing with this countdown clock that ends at noon on Saturday. And just keep pointing to that and going, y'all got 48 hours left. You haven't released those guys yet. Do you not understand what we're saying? Hey, call up some more brigades. Send them down to the Gazan border. Well, you guys got 36 hours left. You're apparently not getting the message because we haven't got our people back. You really don't want anything left in Gaza, do you? You know that plan that President Trump floated about moving all the Gazans out of Gaza? We are going to effect that even if nobody has agreed to take you yet. We're just going to push you all out of Gaza into Egypt and let Egypt deal with you. And if Egypt's got a problem with that, then we'll take it on. We'll take Egypt on too. Bring it. See, that's what needs to happen. That, if they want to really end this in a way that will make Israel safe for generations to come. It's when you try to straddle the fence that you get neutered, because it's a real sharp fence to try to straddle. Jeff says, afraid Hamas will never give up all the hostages. We've already agreed. We talked about this on a previous live. No, Hamas is never going to release all their hostages because that's their only leverage. And Israel has trained Hamas that hostages are leverage, that you can get Israel to do just about anything if you've got some of their people held hostage. And Israel, if they ever want to break that cycle, they're going to have to just give up the current hostages that are there. I hate to say that. It's a terrible tragedy. It's all Hamas's fault. But if Israel ever wants to break this cycle, they've got to show, you know how, you've probably heard that saying. I think it was, the former prime minister of Israel that said, there will always be violence in the Middle East until the Palestinians learn to love their children more than they hate the Israelis. Something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing. Gold in my ear, thank you. She said, there will never be peace in the Middle East until the Palestinians learn to love their children more than they hate the Israelis. Well, the Israelis need to adopt a corollary to that. This is the Chuck Holton corollary to what Golda Meir said. Put this in the history books. There will never be peace in the Middle East until the Israelis learn to value their citizens who are free and hate anybody who would hold their people hostage more than they love the hostages themselves. Now that's a cruel, terrible thing to have to say. I agree. I mean, I'll admit it. But until Israel is willing to say, you've still got 47 of our hostages, you've got until Saturday to give them back, and if you don't, we will make sure that you never have an opportunity to take any hostage ever again. We realize that will result in the deaths of those 47 that are I don't know how many of those are left alive, 16 or so left alive. We realize that they're likely going to die. But their deaths, along with all the others, are right on your heads. Their blood is on your hands, and we are going to make you pay in spades. No more releasing 100 Palestinians for every Israeli or 1,000 Palestinians for every Israeli. No more. No more. We will never again make a trade like that. Enough is enough. That's what it's going to take. But it's not what's going to happen. What is likely going to happen is Israel is going to get back their 3 piddly, hostages in return for, a couple of hundred Palestinian terrorists that they'll get turned back over on Saturday. That's likely what will take place. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is threatening to resume military operations if Hamas fails to release hostages, Israeli hostages on the 15th. But, you know, a lot of this, I believe, I fear, is just for show. And they're all saying, yeah, this is how it's done in the Middle East. So that's that. Now, let's move on to what else is happening in this war. Oh, let me answer these couple of questions I've seen go by before I get to go on to the next subject. Folks, while I'm at it, do me a favor and go over to chuckholton.com. You want to sign up there, subscribe for updates. I take the script from these lives that I do and we condense it down into a article that has point by point, so without all of my rabbit trails and pontificating, and just gives you the information you need to know to pass that on to your friends. You can access that over at chuckholton.com. You can get copies of my books. You can get access to my documentaries. We've got a lot more stuff that's coming out, and get first dibs on the adventure trips that we put on, where you can join me in traveling to places like Armenia, Israel. We're going to Colombia this weekend. You can get first dibs on those trips by being a supporter over at chuckholton.com. So make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel while you're at it. Okay, so to answer these questions here, first of all, very quickly, Lynn's question: what are your thoughts on the peace talks to end the Ukrainian war? That's a whole nother live. I'm sorry, there's too much there, and that's not on the topic of what we're talking about today, Lynn. So I mean, they're starting to put together peace talks. President Trump has already talked apparently with Vladimir Putin and with Vladimir Zelensky. I think in the last 24 hours, he's talked to both of them. Zelensky says they're ready to talk, and Putin says basically they're ready to make a deal as long as the deal includes Ukraine losing. But I think that just from what I can tell, having been to Ukraine personally in the last 6 weeks and having, spent over 6 months there during this war, and based on the economic data that I see coming out as a former stockbroker myself, it looks to me like, Russia has irreparably damaged itself in this war. Ukraine is going to recover. If they end the war, it probably is not going to be perfect for Ukraine. They're not going to get back all the things, all of their territory, and et cetera, et cetera. But they will rebuild and eventually recover all of that, because Russia has irreparably damaged its economy and its demographics because of this war. That's my belief, okay? Leslie Godoy said, question, is any news or moves from U.S. warships around or near Israel to help with this new development from President Trump? I've not seen any intentional movement of the warships that our Navy has in the Gulf of Aden, the Bab el-Mandab Straits. The one thing I can tell you is that while there's nothing new really to report on that topic, it is apparent that the U.S. Navy is preparing to massively strike the Houthis in Yemen. As I have reported previously, the United States has U.S. troops on the ground in Yemen, special operations forces that are working with the actual Yemeni government, which only controls less than half of the country now, to try to assist the Yemeni forces to take back their country from the Houthis and to defeat the Houthis. And I think that in the near term, you will see much more activity against Yemen by the United States. Shipping is still not coming back to the Bab el-Mandab Straits either. So we're not done there by any stretch. This war's not over, folks. Question, can Israel unilaterally pull out of the ceasefire deal just because they changed their mind, or do they have to wait until Hamas breaks the agreement? Well, Hamas has already broken the agreement, Matt, in multiple ways, mostly because they have said they're not going to give back the hostages on Saturday. That right there is a violation of the treaty. I think they could make a case that the humiliating antics that they're forcing these people to go through amounts to public torture of the hostages before they give them back. And I think that the answer is yes. Matt, if Israel wants to pull out of the deal, they can pull out of the deal. They can claim, I mean, that's what Hamas is doing. Hamas is saying we're pulling out of the deal because Israel isn't holding up their end of the bargain, even though they are. Okay, so hopefully that answers that question. Let's see here. I saw another one down here toward the bottom. Afraid Hamas will never give up all hostages. Yeah, they won't. Hamas is not going to give up the hostages. What's your assessment of the Egyptian army buildup on the southern border? Well, the Egyptians are apparently sending troops. I'm not positive whether that's true. I've seen reports of that, but I haven't seen them corroborated. It's not being widely reported anyway. But if they're building up troops on the border with Gaza, it's because they're afraid that the Israelis are going to open the gates and start forcing Gazans into Egypt. And Egypt wants to keep that from happening. Again, two big reasons. Number one, Egyptians don't like Gazans. Whenever the Egyptians have had Gazans into Egypt, the Palestinians have caused lots of shenanigans, and Egypt doesn't want to deal with that. It's costly. But number two, they don't want to be seen as traitorous toward the Muslim, the Brotherhood of Muslims, not the Muslim Brotherhood, but the Muslim world, by taking any pressure off of Israel. Now, Jordan's King Hussein met with President Trump at the White House yesterday, and they talked about it. President Trump said, hey, you really need to take these Palestinians. And King Hussein said, tell you what, we'll agree to take 2,000 sick Palestinian children. They say, I mean, the Gaza Health Ministry, which again, you can't believe anything they say, but what they say is that there are about 5,000 critically ill children in Gaza right now. So King Hussein has agreed to take 2,000 of those. But that's not what President Trump is asking. President Trump is asking King Hussein to take all the Palestinians, which would be really, really bad for Jordan. They've already taken more Palestinian refugees than any other country. About 20% of the people in Jordan are Palestinian refugees out of Gaza. About 60% of the people in Jordan are Palestinians by ancestry. And it would dramatically hurt Jordan economically and every other way to for them to take all of these people. Somebody had a great idea. There's an island off the coast of Yemen that is green and beautiful and lush. I forget the name of the island offhand. And it's very sparsely populated, and it could easily support the Palestinians. They ought to just airlift them or put them on a boat and send them all out to that island and let them have that island. But the people who already live there are like, heck no. And the Palestinians, at least officially, have said, we're not leaving Gaza. Ministry has said in the last day, somehow, since the ceasefire took place, they have Whoop. Come on back. Come on back. Are we back? Okay, there we go. The Starlink once in a while freezes, but just be patient and it'll come back. I'm exclusively using the Starlink now. So just be patient if it freezes. I guess it just, there's a gap in the satellites or something. But look, the Palestinians are not going to leave. President Trump can say what he likes. What I was about to say was that if the audio is unsynchronized, then refresh your page and it should synchronize it back again. If your audio is off, just refresh your page. So the Gazan Health Ministry has increased the death count in Gaza by 1,000 people since the ceasefire took place. Israel's not been bombing or shooting anybody, really. Just a few people that have threatened Israeli troops. And they said that 1,000 more people died because of Israel during the ceasefire. So, whatever. Obviously, you can't believe anything that comes out of the Gazan Health Ministry. Hamas is trying to set conditions through its rhetoric by what it's saying. Thank you, Melissa. To be able to blame Israel if the ceasefire gets broken. So they play this game, they dance around and they threaten to not return the hostages, and they just do everything they can to incite the Israelis to commit violence against them. And even better, to commit violence that they can blame or they can claim was against civilians in Gaza. And then when Israel actually does something like shoot at Palestinians who are approaching their positions in violation of the ceasefire, Hamas can say, see, it's their fault. They did it. Mom, that kind of thing. Somebody asks, are they still flooding the tunnels? No, they haven't flooded the tunnels for more than a year. They tried it for a while and then they decided not to. I'm not sure why. Eric Prince, who was a big advocate of them flooding the tunnels, has been very critical of the IDF for not continuing with flooding the tunnels. I tend to agree with him on that. I think it would have been a great thing to continue doing. But for some reason they quit and they haven't done anything anymore. Same person also asks, will there be a Gaza left since most of it is blowed up? Well, yes, most of Gaza is blowed up, but there's actually plenty left that is not blowed up. Believe it or not, I mean, you see that the videos and the pictures that come out showing Gaza are going to show you the parts that are completely blowed up because it makes for good news. It looks really terrible. But there are live streams going on that the AP puts out on their back channel for journalists that show like the hospitals and different places in Gaza. And from looking at that, there's a lot of places in Gaza that are not destroyed. Maybe by the time this thing's all over, it'll all look like the blowed up parts, but that remains to be seen. We'll see if they can get back to clearing out Gaza, because Hamas has been very busy during the ceasefire, rebuilding its forces, recruiting more and more young men. You realize these guys don't have much of a choice, right? It's like, hey, you're going to come fight for us, or we're going to shoot you in the kneecaps. Haha, take your pick. So, what would you do? But At the same time, they've been trying to rearm and refit. Israel has been very busy making lists of people that they can see from their drones and other means are committing shenanigans, being naughty. And so if they go back to fighting, Israel's going to have they're going to have a big list to work their way through. There's going to be a lot of places that get bunker buster bombs dropped on them. And what the Trump administration has said, thankfully, is that if they do go back to fighting, if the IDF is forced to continue the fight, there will be no restrictions placed on them in terms of the amount of aid that goes in. They specifically mention the aid. And what that means is if Israel decides to shut off everything to Gaza, we're going to keep supplying them with munitions. We're not going to put a stop to that. Now, that's interesting to me because at the same time, the Trump administration is saying that we're going to allow Israel to go as hard as they want in Gaza, no restrictions. The Trump administration is right now telling the IDF that they will not allow the IDF to remain in Lebanon with their troops past the February 18th date that is supposed to be when the quote-unquote ceasefire, under the ceasefire, Israel is supposed to have pulled all their troops out. It's already been extended once. So Israel is telling the United States, look, we are still finding things that are a threat to Israel inside Lebanon. You look at the map, Israel has continued to move and maneuver, searching areas along the border, and every day they are finding more rockets, more munitions, more tunnels, more command posts, et cetera, et cetera. And they're actively blowing those things up. Every day they are seeing Hezbollah operatives trying to move into position, trying to move around armed, and they're dropping surprises on them from the sky. So the fighting has never actually stopped in Lebanon. The Hezbollah guys were extremely damaged to the point where they really couldn't pose much of a threat anymore. But they're still there, and they're desperately trying to reconstitute right now. But remember, the ceasefire deal in Lebanon was not between the IDF and Hezbollah. It was between the IDF and the United States and the government of Lebanon. Now, the government of Lebanon has sort of reconstituted in recent days and elected a new president, prime minister, whatever. And okay, I'll explain why people say occupation in a minute, Alta. Hang on. Thank you. So the new government of Lebanon is saying Hezbollah has no part in our government. Hezbollah had worked its way into becoming a political party in the government of Lebanon. No more. The new government of Lebanon says we are not going to allow Hezbollah to be part of our government any longer. That is great. Now, Israel is saying we need more time in Lebanon to finish. We need 10 more days to do what we need to do to make ourselves safe before we can pull our troops out. And the United States told them today, no, you have to pull your troops out. Which, if I was the Israelis, I'd be like, wait a minute, who are we fighting here? I mean, I understand the United States wants to mediate the ceasefire deal, but the United States should not be telling us what we need to do to make ourselves safe on the ground. That's exactly what the Biden administration was doing. And you said, President Trump, you weren't going to do that. You weren't going to play that game. So they're kind of speaking out of both sides of their mouth just a little bit. President Trump desperately wants a peace Nobel Peace Prize. This is why I don't think he will do anything in terms of all hell breaking out in Gaza, even though he, if you look at what he said, he literally said all of the hostages will need to come out by Saturday or else. His or else, Hamas is going to call that bluff. And when he doesn't rain fire down on Gaza from American jets and American ships, when that doesn't happen, Hamas is going to claim victory yet again. Even if Israel starts raining fire down, if the United States military is not involved directly in that, Hamas is going to claim victory again. How do I know? Because they have been. They've been putting out memes in social media that show President Trump, and they show the fires in the Palisades in California and saying, all hell is breaking out in California. What about here, Mr. Trump? Just poking at him. If President Trump wants to make our enemies fear us, he's going to have to put his money where his mouth is at some point and use righteous violence against the evildoer in a big way, not in a little way, not one drone strike. It's going to have to be very, very visible. And I'm hoping he does, but I sort of doubt that that'll happen. Anyway. Do we know how many people are still in Gaza? Mama Rissa asks. They say it's 2.3 million. They say that the population of Gaza has grown by 4% during the war in the last year. So if this is a genocide, the Israelis are really, really bad at genocide. There's stop signs I saw around Panama City when I was there a few days ago, where some activists in Panama City have been going around, and on every stop sign it says alto, halt, stop. And underneath that, they put a sticker that said the genocide, meaning what's happening in Gaza. Well, if there was a genocide going on in Gaza, don't you think there probably wouldn't be much in the way of population growth during the genocide? The population would not be getting bigger. Now, Alta asks, please explain why people say occupation. Well, what they say is that, what they mean by that is that all of the land of Israel actually belongs to the Palestinians. And so Israelis living in Israel constitutes an occupation of Israel. Now, if you call them out on that, sometimes they will try to hedge and say, well, what we really mean is occupying Gaza, stop the occupation of Gaza. Well, you know what? Israel was not, they had no troops in Gaza up until about the 20th of October, 2023. There was a ceasefire between Israel and Gaza on October 6th, 2023. And you know who broke it. So the term occupation is a lie. And if you are reading an article by any mainstream news outlet, MSNBC, USA Today, CNN, anybody else, and you see them refer to the occupied West Bank, you can just stop reading right there. Whatever else you're going to read is going to be a lie. It's a term that is used in information warfare. It's a method of information warfare, as I've told you, and I continue to tell you all the time. The media is engaged in war against you. It's a war for your opinion. And they don't tell you what's happening. They tell you what to think about what's happening. And that's one of the subtle ways that they do that. when they say it's the occupied West Bank. That is telling you what to believe about that land, which is actually part of Israel. Now, Alta also asks, if Hamas calls the bluff and Trump doesn't act, won't that undermine our authority all over the world? Yes, it will. That's an easy question to answer. Yes, no question right there. Yes. Yeah, they also call it apartheid, right? Yeah, apartheid is ridiculous. Patrick says, your thoughts on U.S. attempts to divide God's land via the long-term occupation of Gaza? I agree with you. That land belongs to Israel. That land is Israel since, the time of Joshua. So Israel can't occupy land that belongs to it. You can't occupy your own land in the traditional sense of the word. It's ridiculous. BK says Hamas is dead. No, actually, they're not. Unfortunately, they say that reports from U.S. intel agencies, this is not from MSNBC or the AP or Hamas, but I repeat myself. U.S. intel agencies say that Hamas has managed to reconstitute many of their battalions that were killed off. The Israelis say that they've wiped out all but like 2 brigades of Hamas fighters, about 2,000 men. But they have managed to recruit thousands more men. And you can see them, they've dusted off their uniforms and they've pressed them and they've put on their nice new masks and their headbands and all that stuff that they won't wear when they're actually fighting. And they've all been marching around under the close gaze of Israeli drones and other technology, let's say. And believe me, a lot of those guys are going to get a one-way ticket to Boomtown when the fighting kicks off again, if the fighting kicks off again. And just wait, they're going to scream bloody murder. If Israel goes back to fighting, which, I mean, they really need to do if they want to win this war, Hamas is going to scream bloody murder, and that they're setting the conditions right now to be able to blame everything on Israel, and the media will lap it up. They'll believe every word of it. Does the U.S. ever plan on recovering their equipment in Iraq? We did leave quite a bit of equipment in Iraq, but we gave it to the Iraqi army. I think what you're probably referring to is the $86 billion of equipment we left in Afghanistan. Now, President Trump sent a word to the Taliban and said, we want all that stuff back. And the Taliban said, no, not going to happen. Again, all we need to do is say, we know where it all is, and we will be landing a battalion of U.S. Army Rangers at Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan very shortly. When we do, all of our equipment, to include night vision goggles, helmets, vehicles, aircraft, everything that we left had better be sitting on the tarmac waiting for us to pick up and leave with. And if it's not, we'll just destroy it wherever it happens to be. We'll come back into Afghanistan and we will start destroying our equipment everywhere we find it. And we just need to have full court press with satellites and drones over Afghanistan at all times so that we can keep track of where they try to hide it and then just start dropping ordnance. It's time for the world to fear America again. And right now they don't. They're not so sure about President Trump, and they're watching. They are watching, believe me. They want to see whether or not President Trump is going to actually take action on something like that. Let's see if he does. He's a negotiator, and so he prefers to negotiate, of course. And he gets a lot done with negotiating, but you're not going to put sanctions. I mean, sanctions on Afghanistan, probably not going to hurt Afghanistan that much. I sure hope that we have stopped giving them $4 million a week we've been giving them in cash, in humanitarian aid ever since we pulled out. The United States taxpayer has been funneling money to the Taliban? What? Give me a break. What do you think about UAP whistleblowers and government disclosure? I think that is not germane to our discussion today, so I'm not gonna talk about that. Sorry. If we can place a GPS chip in an animal, why not the released prisoners to include the beeper effect? Well, they would, Grizzly Mama Bear, they would know that they have, I mean, it'd be very difficult for them not to know that they didn't have those embedded in them. Wouldn't surprise me. Well, let's just put it this way. There's more than one way to track people. You can either track their person by tracking their beeper, their cell phone, walkie-talkie, their car, something like that, with a device that's on their person, in their car, whatever. Or if you happened to perhaps control the area where those people are going to be moving about, you could in place hidden sensors everywhere around those areas. And then you could just wait for them to go back to those areas and you could track them that way. Which do you think Israel is engaged in Gaza right now? That's all I'll say about that. How are they getting all these white trucks? Well, they haven't destroyed every vehicle in Gaza. There are still thousands of vehicles in Gaza, thousands. And they just had them all hidden in many of the buildings and tunnels that haven't yet been destroyed. And when the ceasefire started, they washed them up, polished them up, and rolled them out. Now again, Israel has sensors and eyes in the sky everywhere, and they're going to watch where those things park. They're going to watch where those things go, and you can bet every one of those things is going to get a visit from an airborne complaint, courtesy of the Israeli Air Force, when they do go back to fighting, if they do go back to fighting. The thing that worries me is that President Trump is putting pressure on the IDF or on Benjamin Netanyahu to actually go through with moving on to phase 2 of the negotiations. If you thought phase 1 was torture for the Israelis, wait till you see phase 2. It'll be even worse. Is Lebanon and Gaza deadline on this Saturday? Could be a warning shot to everyone, if that makes sense. Well, yeah, the deadline is this Saturday, but KP1, you'll have to go back and watch from the beginning, because that's kind of that's the discussion here we've been talking about. But to your point, the Israelis are amassing forces once again around the borders of Gaza, more, they say, than they had at any one time during the war so far, and they are preparing to roll into Gaza and go hard against Hamas once again. Hamas is tiptoeing right up to the line, nah, 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 nah. And then it's just like, that annoying kid in your neighborhood when you were a teenager, whatever, that would throw rocks at you every time you rode by on your bicycle. And one day you went over and you know, they would mock you, ha, 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 ha. And then you go over and grab the kid by the shirt and he starts going, Mom, and, you know, acting like you're just the worst person in the world for wanting to throat punch him. That's essentially what Hamas is doing to Israel. And the UN is playing the part of the mother who would never, ever imagine that little Johnny might ever do anything wrong. And so obviously this big, mean bully of a teenager who's punched my son in the face and claims that my son was throwing rocks at him is just lying. That's what the UN is doing, and the media. Fortunately for Israel, the United States is not going to be in that group anymore. What about using targets for tracking? Don't know what targets are, Peter. Sorry. You might be saying targets, but I don't understand what you mean by that. You're going to have to clarify. What does Hamas refuse to release any hostages by Saturday? What if they refuse to release them? Then there will be fighting, Hannah, on Saturday. Guaranteed. If Hamas does not release those guys, there will be fighting on Saturday. No question. Now, what is an open question is whether the U.S. will take part in the fighting. And I would venture to say that no, the U.S. will not take part in the fighting. Okay. Well, we're over an hour now, so I'm gonna end it there for today. Thank you very much for being a part of the Hot Zone and for watching. I'm going to ask again that you go over to chuckholton.com and you can get summaries of all of these lives and all of our videos linked over there. You can get links to my other reporting on Newsmax and CBN and elsewhere. We link that at chuckholton.com. You can become a supporter over there and support what we're doing in caring for people around the globe when we meet people that are having their worst day. Targets are digital tracking nanotech. Oh, I'm going to have to read up on those. Cool. Thank you. Thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, I believe that Israel is employing lots of stuff like that. So we will see on Saturday whether this was a giant game of chicken or if it will result in Israel and or the United States actually doing what they are threatening to do. We'll see. And I'm going to be watching. So will you. All right, Ray, life without Jesus is hopeless. Yes, it is. Thank you for your comments. And, oh, we broke up again. There we go. All right. Thank you very much for watching. God bless you. I got other work I got to do. I got to edit some pieces for CBN. And so we'll see you again next time. Take care.